Greetings, my dear viewers. It is I, Drahon, and welcome to a brand new series I'd like to call Pathfinder Hero Flux. Any good character comes with a good base, which is what I did for Dungeons & Dragons character concept. I took all the different races from that series and looked at the lore to match up with backgrounds and classes to have a sort of basic character for when you didn't know what you wanted to create. I'm doing the same for Pathfinder 2nd Edition with all of their ancestries, but I thought I would start with the versatile heritages and not just races and ancestries, because these versatile heritages can be tacked onto any ancestry. And yes, I know saying heritage in the plural sense sounds hilarious when it comes to this voice. Anyway, we're going to look at the lore with each one of these versatile heritages and see what backgrounds and classes might work for them. And Archives of Nephthys actually helped out a lot with this. I'm not sure if it's just the Archives of Nephthys or it's just Pathfinder in general, but when I was researching these ancestries and heritages on the Archives of Nephthys, it already had a list of possible backgrounds and classes, even a couple of subclasses for a few of them. So let's go ahead and get started. I have separated each of the heritages into 4 categories for my own ease of mind. We have the base alignments, the 6 elements. Yes, I said 6 elements. We'll get more into that later. It is definitely confusing without giving some form of context. Even then, I don't think I have all the context myself. Anyway, next is your half-creature type, not just elemental, since they have their own category. This is for your monstrosity, your undead, your fae. We only have 3, so it kind of makes it a little bit redundant to have everything, but sooner or later there are going to be more heritages that can fit into this category. Same with our last one, Other, or as I'm dubbing it, Living Spell, as you will see later on why it is called that. But let's go ahead and get started with our first, and that is our alignment heritages, which we have 5. Now, this is not to say that you have to play a character of this particular alignment. This is just the type of creature that made each of these heritages. You have the Osama, the Aphorite, the Duskwalker, the Gonzi, and the Tiefling. Now, much like with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, they might represent these alignments, but you're not going to always have a character who follows these alignments to the letter, as we will soon get into. Starting things off with the heritage Osama. According to the lore, these were created by goodly aligned creatures mating with humanoid creatures. So you have different angelic beings of celestial power. If you want a character brimming with celestial power, unique physical characteristics, and the potential for strong faith, you should play an Osama. Now, there are 3 different kinds of Osama that have been recorded. You'll see this quite often. There are subcategories of these heritages. You have your Lawbringers, which are descendants of Archons, your Angelkin, which are descendants of angels, obviously, and Muse Touch, descendants of creatures known as Azatos. Now, like I said, you're not going to always have a character that is goodly aligned, Osamars included. You could have an Osamar that has been corrupted by dark powers, or maybe is a descendant of an evil angel. Who knows? It all is up to your character, up to you, how you create this character. As far as backgrounds go, it is common to see Osamars have the background of Acolyte, Artist, Detective, Entertainer, Field Medic, and Noble. For classes, Champion, Cleric, and Bard are the most common. Let's see. Born with the power of benevolent celestial entities, Osamars are thought to be supremely blessed with strength of will, extraordinary beauty, and innate magical gifts. But, here's the big but, and this can actually play into your Osamar character as part of their flaw. Many Osamars find these perceived talents, whether they actually have them or not, set them apart from their friends and family, fostering loneliness in themselves and jealousy in others. They want to be normal. They don't want to be gifted. They want to be like everybody else. And maybe that can be seen in how people interact with the Osamar. Maybe they hate the Osamar because they're so extraordinarily talented. Or maybe they are jealous that they got these gifts. And maybe it's the exact opposite for the Osamar. They're jealous of others for not having these gifts. It's something to think about when creating your character. How does your character feel about having this type of heritage? Moving on to the Aphorite. If you want to play a character intrinsically tied to an underlying order of the universe, walking the thin line between calculated predestination and free will, you should play an Aphorite. Now, some people might say that the Aphorites are boring because of their strict ties to the lawful alignment, trying to keep everything in order. Couldn't be further from the truth. An Aphorite can be an interesting character, especially when you take into account that some laws actually hurt people. Some laws could cause pain. So the Aphorites, which were created by axiomites from the plane of law, eventually gaining their own free will, could see these laws in a different light. Hardy har pun. Anyway, Aphorites, yes, they were strictly created to make sure that the ancestries that they are tied to have a connection to the axiomites, the plane of law. They're sort of a prophet, almost. But, like I said, an Aphorite could see that some laws just don't help. They hinder. Or, better yet, what if an Aphorite had a corrupt sense of law and order? What if their morality was flipped? A very interesting concept. Imagine an automaton with an Aphorite heritage, and there's a glitch in their system, and they don't have the same morality as other Aphorites. Or maybe every so often their system glitches out, and they strike out against other law-abiding citizens. Again, these things need to be taken into consideration when creating your character. Speaking of which, for your backgrounds, the acrobat, the artisan, the barrister, the emissary, hunter, martial disciple, otherworldly mission, scout, tinker, and warrior are good backgrounds, especially that otherworldly mission. Remember, they were created by the Axiomites for a specific purpose. So, having a character that does follow that purpose does make sense. But you can still make them interesting. As far as classes go, some Aphorites might take up the Alchemist class, Investigator, Oracle, Ranger, or even the Wizard class. And some Aphorites will follow certain deities that are technically lawful, like Abada, Osmodius, Erasteel, or Torag. There are faiths who recognize the benefits of a stable society. Desna appeals to the Aphorites' desire to break from tradition. And some Aphorite artisans follow other gods like Selene or Brai. The Bronze Lady views and awakened constructs also appeal to the Axomite forged Aphorites. So it all depends on your character, what route you go for. Next up is the Duskwalker. Such a shame. I do apologize, but you just died. That mummy lord was a little bit too much for you. But good news. The psychopomps have taken pity on your soul and have seen the great deeds you have done fighting against the forces of undead, and have decided to bring you back to life as one of their servants, the Duskwalkers. That's right, psychopomps created Duskwalkers in order to combat the forces of undeath, because they don't like it when something is brought back to life. If you're dead, you must stay dead. That's their view. So they created the Duskwalkers as an undead assassin. It seems kind of contrary, and that's what one of the psychopomps thought. It's kind of weird to have undead fight other undead. But that's why this psychopomp said, okay, if we're going to do this, we need a finite number of Duskwalkers to ever exist at any point in time. No more than this. Got it? We don't know exactly what that number is. That's probably up to your game master, your dungeon master, your, person in charge, whoever's running your game. It all depends on their world. How many Duskwalkers are in their world? And that could be an interesting key point to have in a campaign. Perhaps a faction of Duskwalkers have turned to the dark side. Maybe your Duskwalker is one of those characters, and another Duskwalker is created at the limit of Duskwalkers and must destroy these other Duskwalkers that have turned to the dark side, so that more goodly aligned Duskwalkers can be formed. It's definitely an interesting concept for a Duskwalker. If you want a character who has a mysterious background, seeks a society or organization to join, or looks to fight against undead, you should play a Duskwalker. But you don't need to simply be hunting undead. Some Duskwalkers even break away from their master's orders to be their own person once again. Or you could have a Duskwalker that goes against the psychopomps and creates more undead, trying to take over the world. Like I said, there's a lot of potential here. And I just love it. Moving on to the backgrounds. Acolyte, Fortune Teller, hermit, martial disciple, otherworldly mission once again, since you are taking orders from the psychopomps to curb the amount of undead that are in the world. And you also have scholar. For classes, the bard, champion, cleric, monk, and wizard are good options here. Next is the Gonzi. These individuals are influenced by chaotic planes. Which mutated their form in a chaotic sort of manner. If you want a character to channel the spontaneous and unpredictable that defies categorization while still finding commonality with other non-conformists, you should play a Gonzi. Gonzis have features that distinguish themselves from their mundane kin and are extremely varied. No two Gonzi are going to be the same even within their own ancestry, per se, as befits their chaotic nature. Protokin Gonzi, which are a variant of Gonzi that were technically created by a protokin, a protein, are most iconic. With feathery hair, iridescent scales, and long serpentine tails, Gonzi tails are notoriously full of mischief, with even their attached Gonzi sometimes baffled by their antics. A tail with a mind of its own! That seems weird. What a perfect way to have a cool character concept. For Gonzi characters, you might find Gonzis with the acrobatic, artisan, charlatan, entertainer, gladiator, or tinker background. For classes, the bard, champion, rogue, swashbuckler, witch, and wizard are going to be the most common. And finally, we have the tiefling, sort of the lower plane variant of the Osama. If you want a character who is supernaturally infused with sinister forces, might have a unique appearance, and can fill the role of a complicated or unexpected hero, you should play a tiefling. Like with the Osama, not all tieflings are evil. Some can be good, can be fighting the forces of evil that spawned them. And this is influenced in their different variations. When the influence of a demon, devil, or other fiend infiltrates the bloodline of a mortal family, tieflings are the inevitable result. Tieflings carry the sinister mark of the fiendish planes upon their flesh, and their specific abilities and physical qualities vary according to their heritage, which there are 3 of listed. This does not have to be yours specifically. You could choose other as an option. You don't have to choose one of these 3. You have Hellspawn, which are descendants of devils, Grimspawn, descendants of demons, and you have the Pit form, descendants of demons. Your demons are basically the Dungeons and Dragons Yugoloths, by the way. As far as characters go, you might have a tiefling who is a charlatan, criminal, hermit, nomad, prisoner, or street urchin. A prisoner and criminal if you are going the more evil route, since some tieflings still do have that criticism upon them, much like some Osamas have the stereotype of you having extraordinary gifts. Tieflings are known to be mischievous, stereotypically. So you could have a character that goes against the stereotype, or at least attempts to. Something might come up to where they can't quite escape the stereotype, or it makes it look like they're still a part of that stereotype. For classes, you could have clerics, bards, monks, rogues, sorcerers, or even wizards. Next is your elemental heritages, which again is ridiculous, but there are 6 different elemental heritages. You have your wood, fire, earth, wind, metal, and of course water. But you also have a genie type that is a combination of all 4 of the normal elements: air, earth, fire, and water. But I've also noticed that with some of these heritages, there are corrupt variants, Blightburn genies. We have 2 known as the Mufeli and Arardas, which are evil variants of the air and earth elementals respectively, or the genies of elemental air and earth. But there's supposedly an evil version of Jan, who is a combination of all 4 elements. But we don't know for sure if it actually exists. Paizo, we need this to come, because holy cow, do I love this concept. The characters practically write themselves with this concept. You could have a Blightburn elemental heritage. It is fantastic. And some of these elemental heritages actually have it already written into their subcategory, which is amazing. Now let's go ahead and take a look at these different elementals. We have the Ardandi, which is the wood elemental scion. Born of elemental wood, for flesh and blood like sap flowing through their veins, just as much elemental essence as they are mortal. They are the descendants of wood elementals, Kizithars, which are the wood genies, dryads, and forest dragons. Or were born under the influence of powerful elemental forces tied to the first world or plane of wood. You don't have to be a descendant of an elemental of wood. You could just be born under the influence of the elemental plane of wood or the first world, which is amazing. There is so much here. There are 3 categories, which are your spring souls born in vibrant, portal-written Grunga forests in the land of the Lindworm King, which could also translate to you're born in a place that has powerful influence of the elemental plane of wood. Next is your Molder soul, which is influenced by the Blight Dark Infection. This is your Blightburns. These are hilarious. I love them. And Amber Soul, descendants of the Kizithar. For backgrounds, the artisan, artist, and scholar are going to be the most common, with classes commonly being with cleric, druid, kineticists, and sorcerers. Next is your fire, the Ifrit. Some Ifrit share a connection from birth to specific aspects of elemental fire, such as radiance, ash, or fire. You have your Cinder Souls, Bright Souls, and Lava Souls. The Bright Souls are even descendants of fire-themed celestials like the Peri. So you could have a fire elemental like Osama. So you can take aspects from the Osama and translate them into these Bright Soul Ifrits. Do I have to repeat myself? Pathfinder knows how to make characters divergent. It is amazing. Common backgrounds would be the artisan, the artist, the entertainer, and a merchant, with classes commonly being the champion, more commonly redeemer champions, and some clerics. I would also put in the kineticist like I did for the wood type elementals, which I don't know why I didn't put it in here, but kineticist, definitely on this list.
Next is the Oread, born with a special connection to a specific subset of elemental earth, such as crystal, dust, or mud, might have an Oread lineage. Might have? A very strange choice of words there, Paizo. Might? We'll get more into that later. But to start things off, we do have some subcategories of Oreads, such as the Dust Soul, which are born in deserts or to families who were farmers for generations. So that could have something to do with the might, since you're born to farmers instead of being tied to the elemental earth. So possibly your farmer family was in a special type of field, much like with some of the earlier Geniekin that have an environment tied to the elemental plane of Earth. Maybe that's what it's referring to? It's not getting very specific with this one, so I don't entirely know here. Next is the Gem Soul, descendant of crystal dragons, or perhaps an elemental that is primarily made out of gemstones. It probably up to your dungeon master or to you working with your dungeon master. Next is Mire Soul. Now, it sounds like another one of those Blightburn elementals, but it's just a descendant of more sodden creatures of elemental earth. It seems that the Mire Soul are the more generic Oread. For characters, the backgrounds that best fit the Oread are artisans, herbalists, and miners, though as we just discussed with the Dust Soul, there is a possibility of the farmhand background, since you may have been born to a generation of farmers. For classes, the Cleric and Stone Order Druid are some good options, as well as the Kineticist, like with most of these Geniekin, since you are tied to the elements. Speaking of being tied to the elements, we do have the Suli, a type of Geniekin that are typically descendants of Jan, who are genies of the four main elements: air, earth, fire, and water. And these genies are constantly roaming the material plane, so there is a possibility that you will have a lot of different types of Suli. Basically, these Suli are your avatars, your avatar Aang. So if you wanted to create a character based on the avatar from that series, you might want to go for the Suli heritage. As for backgrounds that might associate with the Suli, you might want the Acolyte, Artisan, Bounty Hunter, Emissary, Nomad, or Scholar. Maybe even something else related to these Jan. Maybe the Chosen One, to go with that sort of avatar flavor that we were talking about. Much like with the other types of Geniekin, you'll want a class that best suits your elemental tendencies. So classes that are close with the elements are going to fit your style very well as a Suli, like the Alchemist, Bard, Kineticist, Monk, or Wizard. Moving on to our air elementals, the Sylph. Some Sylphs are born with connection to the extremely focused aspects of elemental air, such as smoke, storms, or toxic gas. Ooh, toxic gas. I love this because that refers back to that Blightburn elemental, which is still phenomenal. While it does happen, a child is rarely born with a lineage that differs from their parents, as Geniekin typically pass these unusual gifts on to their offspring. That's a weird notion to have, because that was not mentioned in any other Geniekin. Just this one. Why is that? Oh, that could probably be up to your dungeon master. You probably could have something similar to the Avatar series. In the secondary season that we do not want to talk about for obvious reasons, there were benders that were born either without their normal bending, like a different type of bending, like lava bending or metal bending, or very so often they are born without bending at all. So you could have something similar in this sort of aspect. Subcategories of the sylphs are the storm soul, being born in areas prone to tornadoes or windstorms, smoke souls, descendants of beings known as belkers, or fume soul, associated with poisonous or unbreathable gas, like with that Blightburn genie. That would actually be a perfect character. I just love that concept. For your character itself, you might want to go with backgrounds such as the acrobat, entertainer, nomad, or scout. Classes you might lean into champion, more commonly the liberator. Also clerics, kineticists, sorcerers of either draconic or elemental bloodline, and wizard, though that, like I said, elemental bloodline is going to be for most sorcerers with a Geniekin heritage, at least commonly. Moving on to Talos. These are your metal elementals, which have been confused for the earth elemental, which is kind of weird, but yeah, that makes sense. You look like you're made of rock. You're made of elements in the earth. So yeah, you probably are going to be confused for an Oread or something similar. Taloses are Geniekin gifted with the magic of the elemental plane of metal, resonate with the unlimited potential of raw ore, the treasured shine of polished gold, or the forgiving ring of a hammer forging a broken blade. There is a subcategory mentioned in the feats known as a Pharaoh's soul, but that's just a feat, so that seems to go into these other two subcategories known as gilded souls, which are descendants of sky dragons, or the quick soul. The quick soul's weird, because how does that happen? Parents were exposed to metal-based alchemical fumes during pregnancy, and then you were born. What? I mean, I've heard weirder, but as far as this goes, this is kind of weird. As for characters of the Talos heritage, you might consider the artisan, entertainer, merchant, miner, or tinker backgrounds, with classes being either the alchemist, bard, kineticist, or inventor. And lastly, we have our Undyne, our water elementals. Most Undyne feel they personify specific aspects of water, some seeing themselves with the strength and power of the waves, the speed and tenacity of a river current, or the calm and peaceful lake of a pond. Others identify with these aspects and more, their demeanor shifting like the tides from one situation to the next. So that is definitely a good personality trait, I guess, for your Undyne. You kind of shift with the tide, or you're basically moody. You have multiple different personalities going on, or you just change your mood every so often. Subcategories of Undyne include the Rime Soul. These are your icy versions found in the cold northern countries or on top of mountain peaks. Brine Souls are your descendants of brine dragons or similar creatures. And you have your Mist Souls, which have a mixture of elemental air and water, which could explain what the entry on the Sylph was mentioning, being somewhat different from your parentage. So possibly you have an Undyne father who is a Mist Soul, and a mother who is a Brine Soul, and then you get a child of a Sylph heritage. It's possible. For characters, you might want to choose the Animal Whisperer, Artist, or Sailor backgrounds. As far as classes go, the most common of the Undyne are going to be Bards, Clerics, Kineticists, or Sorcerers of the Elemental or Genie bloodlines. Again, I think that would be classified for any of these Geniekin, as they are Geniekin. So having that for any of them would make the most sense. I probably should have just put them in there, but it was mentioned here, not there. Alright, next we have our creature half-types. Your Beastkin, Changeling, and Dampier. First off is the Beastkin. Beastkin is a blanket term for any person who has gained the ability to partially or fully transform into an animal through any number of means. So they are lycanthrope. It actually mentions it in this entry that they are born of were creatures or have a were creature ancestor in their lineage. The curse can't fully manifest, but it's still there. And also, you have none of the weaknesses of a lycanthrope. You do not have the weakness to silver, and you don't lose control during the full moon. So, all the benefits of lycanthropy with none of the downsides. So, yeah, you can have a cool werewolf character, but you are still considered an outcast within your community, so you might want to be careful. And you might even get kicked out, which will lead to some of these backgrounds. Animal Whisperer, Bandit, Charlatan, Criminal, Farmhands, Herbalists, Hermits, Hunters, Nomads, Prisoners. They probably see you as a monster, so that kind of makes sense. A refugee, a scavenger, a scholar, a scout, or even a street urchin. For your classes, you'll most commonly see the Barbarian, Druid, Fighter, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, and the Witch. Why the Witch? That's a weird one to list there. Well, I think I could explain that with two patrons of the Witch, the Curse and the Wild patrons. These might be something that a Beastkin Witch might actually take on. Next is the Changeling. If you're from Dungeons & Dragons, you might think, oh, Changeling, great, we can play doppelgangers in Pathfinder. Not really. Changelings aren't the changelings from Dungeons & Dragons. They are more related to the Dungeons & Dragons version of the Hexblood. These are the children of hags. Tales of children stolen away, replaced by monsters, exist across countless cultures. But the true monsters are the hag mothers of these strange children. After the hag seduces, uses, and disposes of their father, the changeling child is usually abandoned in their father's community to be raised among them. Such a child faces no end of challenges, often beginning life as an orphaned outsider. To continue this very strange nature, changelings can be any gender, but women in particular are vulnerable to the call, a psychic influence that urges them to abandon their mortal life, join the hag's coven, and eventually become a hag. Wow, that is a lot of struggles for the changeling. First off, you're born, you're mother seduces, uses, and just kills off your father, so great, you've got that going for you. But then you have to be subjected to this call, this urge to join your mother's coven as another hag. Ugh. So that's definitely something. For characters that are changelings, you have backgrounds such as the artisan, charlatan, entertainer, farmhand, fortune teller, herbalist, hermit, merchant, noble in those rare cases where your mother decided to seduce a noble and leave you at your father's house or estate, and the tinker. For classes, you have the bard, druid, ranger, rogue, sorcerer of the hag bloodline, and a witch with a hag patron. Makes sense to me. Next, we have the Dompier. Much like with the Beastkin, you get all the upsides of the vampire, but none of the downsides. Well, technically you do have some downsides as a Dompier, like, for example, healing is not exactly good for you in the normal sense. Healing magic damages you from what I've read. The circumstances surrounding the Dompier's birth are rare, complex, and often shrouded in horrific rumors stoked by social revulsion at the idea of an undead monstrosity producing mortal offspring. So yeah, there's a lot of things going on with Dompier. We all know what they are. As for Dompier characters, you might want to go for an acolyte, criminal, hermit, noble, nomad, scholar, or street urchin background with the classes of champion, oracle, ranger, rogue, sorcerer of the undead bloodline, swashbuckler, witch, or wizard of necromancy. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to our final entry, the Reflection. Now, we probably already know of the Reflection if you have been following my character creation series where we did Pit and Dark Pit. Reflections are doppelgangers created after something went wrong with a ritual, or perhaps a living reflection joined you inside this material plane. Stories of malevolent duplicates are commonly told around campfires to frighten companions. In these tales, the duplicate forms after a botched ritual or exposure to a mysterious artifact and is bent on replacing the creature they've replaced. I would go a little bit further into this. Maybe you did replace your original counterpart, but the original counterpart is coming back to take their life back. Or maybe they came back as a revenant to kill you, the Reflection. If you want a character who seeks to forge their own identity in the face of their duplicate nature, with a strong tie to another character somewhere out there in the world, you should play a Reflection. So there is a chance that you could play away from the typical nature of the Reflection. But it all depends on your ancestry, as does how you build this character. But the question then becomes, what ancestry do you choose? We're going to take a look at this series of what each ancestry is capable of and what exactly they are, what the lore says about these ancestries. So stay tuned if you want to check out next video where we take a look at one such ancestry. Until next time, this has been Drehan, and I am offline.